You have to understand the fire ladder. This tree was born in the same year as Jesus, and it was destroyed in a lightning fire in 2020 on a hot, windy summer day. And while many people wept over seeing these ancient giants shattered to the earth, nobody asked the obvious question. If redwood groves burn every few hundred years, how did these get to be 2,000 years old? What happened 2,000 years ago that allowed for these trees to become so robust? You see, trees don't burn easily. There's an inversely proportionate relationship between the density of a fuel and its probability of ignition. The hotter it burns, the more energy it takes to set it on fire in the first place. Heavy timber burns white hot when it ignites, but it ain't easy to get going. If you throw a match at a redwood tree, nothing happens. But throw a match into a patch of dry grass, and it goes up like tissue paper. Grass doesn't burn very hot, and thus it has a very high probability of ignition. Easy come, easy go. Fast-growing light fuels like grass don't burn hot enough to set heavy timber on fire. But grass does burn hot enough to ignite light brush. And light brush burns hot enough to ignite medium brush. And when medium brush gets into heavy brush, then shit really starts to boil. And thus you have the fire ladder. Ladder fuels are the progressively heavier and larger fuels that have enough energy release potential to carry a tiny spark from the ground to the crown of a 2,000-year-old tree. And once you have a crown fire, good luck.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live! Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! Thing sucks!
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. I told you. How many times did I tell you this was coming? Washington, D.C. is finally coming for California. Finally. You guys better learn, if I hint at something, it's for a reason, okay? I'm a lot more juiced into this stuff than any of you realize. And unlike a lot of social media personalities who just dump everything the moment they have it, I'm relatively judicious about what I disclose. There's a time for everything. And sometimes that patience is difficult to find, but it all comes out. It all comes out. This is just the beginning, folks. We'll get into that. The Garnet Fire, the Garnet Fire explodes for the 12th time. Not really sure why we should care, but who knows why it's exploding? What happened? Did the climate change? Did the weather change? Why is the Garnet Fire suddenly exploding? And does it really matter? We've got a whole bunch of stuff, dude, and it's only going to get more interesting as we go along. It's going to be a very busy week. Now, previously, I told you guys to pay attention to Washington, D.C. There's big news coming out of our nation's capital this week. And there are a few layers to this, and we'll get into all of them. But before we got into that, I just wanted to ask a question. Because my wife and I, we just rescued a cat, like literally, not from a rescue, like we literally rescued a cat out from underneath a car. And we heard this mewing, and she was like stuck up in between the tire and the wheel well and under some stranger's car. We got her out, and she just was covered in feces and fleas. And we put her in a little box, and we took her to the shelter just to have them give her a little checkup, see if she needed some shots. And we gave her a flea dip, took her home. And now she is just the cutest little creature on the planet. And I don't understand people who don't like cats. I, for the life of me, cannot understand anybody who dislikes cats. So let me ask you, are you a cat person or are you a dog person? We have these two teams. Are you a cat person or a dog person? I do not understand anybody who dislikes cats. I want you guys to answer that in the chat. We're going to get to that. Now, before we get to all of our juicy stuff, Phil Cunningham sent me this earlier. He tagged me in it, I should say. Let's pull it up here. This I found was very interesting. When you read the English portion of this quote, when the fire comes, men and women and children can be killed, but know that afterward the scorched earth bears fruit in abundance, and the fire gives also light and warmth. And for these reasons, fire can be death, but fire is also life. Fire is magic. It's the Chronicle of Jacques Sasera, the 14th century. Anyone who's seen my film Hot Shot, of which we just watched a clip about ladder fuels, you'll know that life and death and that thin red line, or that thin black line, as it were, in between life and death, when it comes to fire, that is a central theme of my film. And this was something that I always grappled with, because in California in particular, we have this view of wildfire as a force of destruction. And this sort of informs our view on it. This is part of the reason why so many communities are hesitant to allow fire to do its work as the natural cleaning crew for the forest. Because of that, we get into a lot of problems. The thing is, I understand both sides of this. And this is something that I've always attempted to reconcile in my own way, right? It's hard to see animals getting burned up, people getting burned up, homes getting burned up. And let's face it, it's hard to see all these trees get burned up, because a lot of times you're looking at something that's been there for hundreds of years, sometimes even thousands of years. When I was on the CZU complex up in Big Basin Redwoods, some of those trees were older than Jesus. And it's pretty difficult to watch all that come crashing down. So I concede that. As cavalier as I am about, hey man, we got to let fire move through the landscape, I can't deny that there's a sadness that comes with some of this. And so I'm always sort of grappling with that life-giving and life-taking nature of fire. But this is sort of the nature of existence, isn't it? Now, on that note, we come to the Garnet Fire. Now, this thing, it started romping again a little bit, right? It put up a pretty spectacular display. So we're just going to watch like the last 24 hours of fire behavior. And I guess I want you guys to watch the plume and see if you notice anything. See if something stands out to you. Now, what we're looking at around here was they fired off that area to kind of protect it, so they're in a good spot. But this thing did start cranking a little bit today. Let's see if we could go and check another view of this thing. And while we're looking at some of these, I want you to answer this question. Why is it cranking? There's no fire weather going on. So what happened? Let's take the Delilah look out. I think this was giving us some good views. Let's look at the last 24 hours off of this. We'll let it load. It's moving through some drainages. So this is early in the morning, 5 in the morning, coming into the AM. And then once that thing starts ventilating, it looks like it's just pushing through a few drainages, honestly. Not too crazy. Not too crazy. But there's been times where there's some pretty serious vertical plume development. Daniel Firecopter on top of it as always. It's topography and terrain driven, plus the fuels, right? Which I think is what he meant to say. It's topography and fuels. So when it comes to wildfire behavior, we have WTF, right? What the fuck? We have weather, topography, and fuels. Those are the things that tend to influence the fire the most, obviously. These are the main components. And we've talked about how in this area, we're looking at an area that hasn't seen fire in over a century. And so it is way overloaded with fuels. This is why I wanted to play that clip at the front end to understand how fire carries through this landscape and get into those old growth trees and be extremely destructive, right? But at the end of the day, this is ultimately a good purging wildfire for the forest. The main problem is we've excluded fire from this area for so long. This fire is burning a lot more intensely than we would like it to. And so there is a risk that you are going to change the nature of that forest for a long time. And it's not necessarily an ideal situation. We continue to have this problem in California where we refuse to accept the inevitability of wildfire and its good benefits on this land. And because of that, we end up creating a problem where we're going to confront these devastating fires. They're going to burn a lot hotter than we want them to. Now, at the end of the day, do we really care? And I'm curious to know what you guys actually think. Do we care about this fire? Do we care about what it's doing? It's not burning up cities. It's not burning up towns, right? This is bigger than the LA fires that we saw earlier in the year, but they were way more destructive because they were in the wrong place. And this always comes to bear when we watch this back and forth. Or it's not even the back and forth, right? It's just Gavin like launching these bombs at the feds all the time when he's talking about fires burning in federal lands and like, what am I supposed? I'm not supposed to be accountable for the fires burning on the Forest Service lands. And whenever I tweet about Gavin, there's always some clown who comes at me about that. Like, oh, did you know that half of California's forests belong? Yes, I think I know that. Like I literally made the film about this stuff, guys. I always love it when people come at me like, oh, did you know this thing about California fire? It's like, yeah, I think I know about it. But the issue is the overwhelming vast majority of structures are not anywhere near federal lands. And so we typically don't care a whole lot when fire is doing its thing through here. Now, sometimes it does create a problem, but at the end of the day, most of the structures, they interface with vegetation. They're not in these Forest Service lands. And so it's kind of this fallacy where we point to the fact that, yes, we have some acreage burning. We have huge vast of wildlands. And I think there's this perception that a wildfire has to occur in the wildlands. And obviously what we've seen is that's not the case. The biggest concern is when it's burning on state property, like Topanga State Park, Gavin Newsom's property, because that completely surrounded the Palisades, and that is what did it in. The Garnet Fire could rip 150,000 acres and nobody would care. Team Plant would care. And yeah, there are some structures in the way, but at the end of the day, civilization is not out here. Okay, so to a certain degree, I think it's okay that this fire is burning. And what else do we know about this fire, by the way? Human hands had nothing to do with this fire. Now, human hands, in terms of intervening in the wildlands and creating this fuel load, did influence the fire behavior, especially on days like today. However, this was a lightning fire, right? Am I wrong, guys? Please correct me if I'm wrong. This is a lightning fire. So this is a fire that would be moving through the landscape no matter what. So whenever you have people saying, oh, the problem is that we have too many people causing ignitions. Yes, that is a thing, certainly. But we still have lightning, okay? So this is a natural part of the landscape. We need to learn how to accept these fires. And this one is going to burn until there's snow. It's going to go till there's snow. And I believe it's Dave Toisson who was the first one to kind of say this one's going to burn until it rains. And now I hear everybody saying that. I feel like it's important to give people credit when they have, the original thought on something. And I do believe Dave was the first to say this thing's going to go until it rains. I do believe that's the case. And we're talking rain in excess of the rain that came with those thunderstorms from last week. That was enough to suppress the day. Remember, we've talked about this, how those kinds of thunderstorms, they can help you on the day, but they are not going to help you on the season. It's too early for that. What we need is 2 to 3 inches of significant rainfall later in the year. So ostensibly October, November. You get 2 inches in October and November in Southern California. That's typically considered a season-ending event. And then at that point, you can kind of take her easy for the rest of the year. Phil Cunningham says, lightning official cause. Daniel Firecopter says, yep, it's lightning and nothing else. Bingo. Nailed it. Nailed it. Dude, I take a couple days off. I still got it. Now, why is this burning the way that it's burning? Okay. Obviously, we see the terrain. This is the problem, guys. This is what we have after a century of excluding fire from the landscape. I know that we talk about this all the time. We talk about the impact, but I really like this clip from our film Hot Shot where I managed to find 2 images that were basically from the exact same vantage point of the Bear Creek Station. Now, this is up in the Plumas, okay? So it's not the same forest, but you get the idea, right? And this is generally the problem throughout the state, at least in these mixed conifer forests. Look at the difference. I want to play this thing on loop. I wish there were a way I could just put this on my Twitter profile to just loop, like as my profile background picture, so people can really grasp what the forests were like when we inherited them from our barefoot ancestors. Because when we look at the after picture, this 2002 picture, I think it's very tempting to look at that and go, oh man, nature is thriving. Look at it. It's exploding with growth. But anyone who deals with wildfire looks at that and goes, yeah, that's a ticking time bomb. And anyone, not necessarily who deals with wildfire, but anybody who deals with forestry looks at that and says, these trees are dying. These trees are dying. A part of the reason why this fire is burning so hot right now, a lot of these trees have been killed. They're standing dead trees from the bark beetle. Now, People oftentimes, they visualize or interpret the bark beetle infestation as if it were a plague of locusts that just descended onto the forest or due to climate change. They always say that. Look, the bark beetles are always there, just like the cold virus is always around us. But we tend to only get sick in the winter. Why? Is it cold season? Did the cold virus suddenly show up? Wrong. It's just that we're not getting that much sun, so we're not getting exposure on our long bones. That's how you absorb vitamin D through the sun, is exposure through your long bones, like your femur, your humerus, your tibia, right? That's how you generate vitamin D in your body. And the less sun exposure you have, guess what? The less vitamin D you have and the sicker you get. And that's basically what happens is you tip the balance in that fight between your immune system, which normally has the upper hand all year long, and then suddenly it gets weak enough that that cold virus that's been battling and getting rebuffed all year can finally, I'm starting to do Gavin stuff. That's when it takes over. So it's the same with the bark beetle. Now, bark beetles, typically, they get trapped by a tree's natural defense, which is viscous sap. But when trees are water stressed, either from drought or from fire debt, like this, where you have such an overcrowding, you've now invited 300 people to your one keg party. Now nobody's having fun, right? So you only have one keg, you should only have like 10 trees there, right? If you invite every single frat house, nobody's gonna have fun because there's just not enough for everybody. So this is what happens. Fire debt creates that water stress, and now all of a sudden the trees don't have that viscous sap, they're all dry on the inside, and so the beetles can just core right through and they end up killing everything. So a lot of people seem to underappreciate fuel loading as it pertains to wildfire. The other thing they talk about is how, having a more clear forest or having fuel breaks, it doesn't work. Because why? Well, because fires spot. They spot a mile ahead of themselves. Sometimes they'll spot 3 miles ahead of themselves. They always like to cite the most extreme case and say, this invalidates this tried and true technique, right? It's sort of like saying, well, you got sandwiched between two semi-trucks and you died in a car wreck. Therefore, seatbelts don't work. That's not the case, guys. Seatbelts work. They work. It's just, in the most extreme circumstances, they're going to be limited in their efficacy. So I did something, right? I've been on here showing you guys so many U.S. Forest Service studies. How many times have I showed you the sciencey science stuff? How many times have we had the cunning Phil Cunningham in here talking about how important this stuff is? And you don't listen, because I still see this narrative permeating through Twitter. I still get pushback. And the mainstream media refuses to talk about the real problem here. They only give it lip service every once in a while. So what did I do? Well, I cleaned out my chicken coop. That's what I did. That's my contribution to fire science. We've established the Smoky Mountain Fire Lab. So we got to clean out our chicken coop every once in a while. And I took this opportunity to do a little test to show you guys. Now, I want to set this up for you. This is in our backyard. We've got a burn pile where we burn all kinds of stuff. Now, we took all the pine flakes, all these pine shavings out from our chicken coop. They're full of chicken shit. It smells fantastic. And what I did was I created essentially two piles. I created this, let's say this upper pile, this northern pile here. This is a lot denser, it's a lot wider, and it's stacked higher, okay? It's stacked about twice as high as this southern stack. And then I created a fuel break. Now, I wanted to create like this L shape out of that northern chunk. And then, by the way, the far northern chunk of this, let's call that division delta. Why? Because that's donkey piss. Okay, so those are the shavings from our donkey's house, and it's soaked in piss. So these are really wet fuels, so they're not very receptive to fire. But everything else is from the chicken coop. It's very dry, and it's full of fertilizer. So in creating this fuel break, we have winds coming from this handsome mustachioed man right here. There are winds blowing up canyon towards the what this would be is the west. Okay, so I'm going to light both of these piles on fire. Now, do you think that this little fuel break that I cut is going to hold this southern chunk? And before I light all this on fire, I want you guys to predict what is going to happen. What is going to happen? Is this fuel break going to hold? And which side is going to burn faster? Which one is going to burn hotter? Which one's going to burn more intensely? What do you guys think is going to happen? I want you to put in your answers before I hit play on this. All right, so remember, the chunk on the north, the bigger one that's got this dog leg on it, I wanted to see if that side has way more fuel than the southern one. It's a lot thinner fuel, even though it's all stacked together. It's just a lighter fuel load, right? So there's no spacing, but it's just stacked more densely on the north. I wanted to see if it will work its way around this dog leg, even though the winds are going from east to west, or if this fuel break ahead of the smaller pile is going to hold, okay? And the winds are kind of ripping. You'll see it as we go, all right? I want you guys to tell me what you think is going to happen, and we will play this. Notice what's happening right away. Notice how right away the denser pile is burning a lot faster. Now, I lit them both at the same time. I actually lit the southern pile a few seconds earlier than the northern pile, and yet it's already outpacing it. And you can see that it's burning hotter. So let's continue to see what happens. It's still outpacing the southern pile. And you'll notice the fuel break held. The fire did not spot. And yet that bigger pile, that northern pile, dog-legged around and took out all that stuff. Interesting, right? And then when it hit the donkey piss area to the far north in Division Delta, it kind of fizzled out. Super Pav is saying, I'm seeing some endangered plant at risk. Shut it down. Brother, this ain't California. This is America. We're in Tennessee right now. We can do whatever the hell we want. How jealous are you guys, by the way? How jealous are you that where I live, out in rural Tennessee, I can burn whatever the hell I want whenever I want? How cool is that? So when we have some acreage, and I will do a video the next time I clear my lower acreage, I'm going to do a video to show how long it takes one dude with a chainsaw to clear out about an acre to 2 acres, all right? And I'm not good at this stuff, so it's going to be a good test. But we can stack up our piles and we can burn them anytime we want. It's awesome. So the thing that stood out to me with this impromptu chicken shit experiment is how just the density of the fuels, having a more dense pile of fuels on that northernmost pile, it burns faster, hotter, more intensely. And I was surprised that it burned faster. I can understand it burning more intensely, but I was surprised that it actually moved faster. And then it dog-legged around. So it was more likely to flank its way south than for that southern pile to jump. So when we watch what's happening with the Garnet Fire, understand how fuel loading is so important on fire behavior, and understand that fuel breaks work. They don't work 100% of the time. And yes, with the extreme conditions, it's going to be a problem, but they do work, right? What else we got going on? It'll be interesting to see what this thing does over the next few days. I do believe that it's probably just going to go until there's snow. Now, Spencer Pratt, we haven't talked about him for like a few hours. So let's talk about Spencer Pratt. Just a quick aside. Something happened today, and this is a prelude of things to come. I've been telling you, and I've been telling you over and over and over, the feds are coming to save California from itself. They're coming, okay? It's finally happening now. This is Kelly Loeffler. Ms. Loeffler is she is the head of the SBA, the Small Business Administration. Now, just as a side note, the SBA is the only reason why I was able to make Hotshot, by the way. So during the COVID shutdowns, when government shut down my ability to work and shut down my business, I had to take out an SBA loan just to stay afloat. We had a lot of obligations because we had a whole bunch of commercial campaigns, and they rugged us. So I took out an SBA loan. And because of that, I was able to stay afloat. And then since I wasn't able to work, I ended up chasing fires for all of 2020. So I couldn't have made my film without the SBA. Now, Ms. Loeffler was not affiliated with the SBA at that point, but from everything that I know about her, she seems to be very proactive about genuinely trying to help small businesses, especially in California, in the wake of the Palisades Fire. So now, why is she here with Spencer Pratt? And what happened with Spencer Pratt? He looks very serious, by the way. I think that's Luke Melcher on the left, and he's a contractor, and he's been doing a lot of surprisingly good investigative journalism, just because he has sort of access to this information about how there's no rebuilding going on in the Palisades, which we've shown you a lot of that, and also a lot of these sales are going to foreign buyers. Now, Spencer Pratt has been frustrated with the fact that none of the local news agencies have been covering what's going on in the Palisades. They're just uninterested. And for some reason, California politicians are uninterested in trying to investigate what in the hell happened with the Palisades fire. And so what Spencer has done is very deliberately managed to bait them into coming and observing and actually showing up. So he managed to get all of the local news stations to show up just by riling them up. So I saw that he posted earlier today. He's like, where are all these local reporters? Why are they not covering LA issues on the Palisades fire? And so then he managed to trick them into all coming. And I'm probably going to have some clips from that video tomorrow. But if you guys in LA saw the KTLA broadcast, I don't know if they broadcast everything that he said, which is why I need to get you guys the raw video, which I have. I just didn't get it early enough to be able to put it up here. Man, did he tear into these people, and they deserve it, because the lack of action from California politicians is absolutely staggering. And I do not understand it. I do not get it. On the other hand, we have this. I told you this was coming. I told you this was coming. Rick Scott, senator from Florida, and Ron Johnson announced investigation into California wildfire response and preparation. Reservoirs were empty, fire hydrants went dry, and innocent people, including many vulnerable seniors, perished. U.S. Senator Rick Scott from Florida, again, from Florida. California has two senators, Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff. Where are they? Why? Why are they letting people from out of state lead this investigation? The Palisades is full of people who voted for Adam Schiff. They're like, you understand, it's a majority Democrat area. Why are they not more concerned about their constituents? I ask this honestly. Why are California politicians so uninterested in this? Why is this going down the political divide? Now, Gavin Newsom, I shouldn't say Gavin Newsom, because it was Gavin Newsom's blue-haired intern, because Gavin Newsom is currently in Italy. He is not operating as governor right now. And so in response to the Florida senator launching an investigation to try to get answers, because of course, what has happened so far? We're supposed to have 3 investigations, and they're supposed to be out by now. Karen Bass, the city of LA, they're supposed to have their independent investigation of the Palisades fire. They've delayed it. The state, Gavin Newsom, promised his own independent investigation. He's delayed it. The ATF, they completed their investigation. That's the feds. They delayed it. And they're lying and saying that it's not complete. It is complete. I know this for a fact. Now, given all the things that I've told you is coming, do you doubt me that I know that the ATF report is done? Why are they sitting on it? Why is everybody sitting on it? And why is a senator from fucking Florida the only one who's trying to get answers to this? We have so many residents in the Palisades who are just hung out to dry. They need this ATF report in order for their lawsuit to go through. And they need their lawsuit to go through so they can afford to rebuild. All of these people are burning through their money right now because they're all renting houses or on Airbnb. God knows what else they have to do to survive. They have no chance at surviving unless there's some restitution, like immediately. The fact that we are now in month 9, and not a single one of those 3 agencies between the feds, the state, and the city, they're still delaying all this stuff. It's inexcusable. I love that somebody is stepping up to the plate to try to get something on behalf of these victims. But why is it Rick Scott? Why is this not Adam Schiff? I do not understand. Why are Democrats so resistant to this? Why is this up to Republicans to do? Why has this become tribal? I don't get it, especially in a Democrat majority city. So anyway, like I said, Gavin Newsom's blue-haired intern, who is running the governorship while Gavin's cavorting in Italy, and for some reason not telling anybody where he's at, but he is in Italy. He says, in a statement, Mr. Newsom's blue-haired intern said on Monday that the state had mounted one of the most aggressive wildfire responses in American history, and that he welcomed the congressional attention. Really? He's going to regret saying that. It complements the thorough investigations already taking place. Taking place? Why are they not done? Including by the federal government, the state, and an independent review by the nation's leading fire experts. He said, his blue-haired intern said, from day one, we've embraced transparency. Oh my God, that's rich coming from that dude. From day one, we've embraced transparency because Californians deserve nothing less. I should have read that doing the Gav hands. From day one, we've embraced transparency because Californians deserve nothing less. The Gav hands. He's really going to regret saying this. And Rick Scott responded in kind. He said, "Glad to hear it, California Governor Newsom. I look forward to your full cooperation." This is tongue in cheek, by the way. Now, let me ask you a question. Who do you think is on the witness list for Senator Rick Scott's investigation? There are going to be subpoenas. Do you understand this? People are going to be called to testify. Who do you think is on their wish list of witnesses? I know who's on that list. I know exactly who's on that list. Are they going to get everybody that they want on that wish list? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe not. But I do know who's on that list. Oh, man. Maybe one of these days I'll get to tell you how I know some of this stuff. But I'm curious who you think is on the witness list for this investigation. Who do you think they're going to call up to Congress in front of all those cameras? You know, that big marble slab that they have in the Senate building with all the politicians grandstanding. And of course, because for some reason, this has become politically tribal. Why is it? So we're going to get a bunch of Republicans finger-wagging Gavin Newsom, and then you're going to get a bunch of Democrats saying, "Oh, this is a farce. It's a witch hunt. It's climate change." And that's all they're going to talk about. You're just going to have these Democrat politicians that are just going to be like leading the witnesses. This is climate change, right? This is unprecedented, right? They had hurricane force winds. And then someone like from the National Weather Service is going to say, "Well, it was like 38 miles an hour in the Palisades." And they're like, "Well, that's still, they were knocking over trash cans, right?" So anyway, it's going to be a clown show, of course, but I like that there's some scrutiny on this. And I like that there's some pressure on California politicians who seem to have zero interest in investigating this. I don't know why. Now, I keep saying that this is not Gavin Newsom responding because, of course, Gavin Newsom is not in California. He's not even in the country. He's in Italy. He's not operating the state right now. And for some reason, they're being very hush-hush about it. But dude, there's spies everywhere. There are little rabbits everywhere. And this is the thing that people need to understand. There are rabbits everywhere. So this is obviously a very dumb move by the blue-haired intern. This is why you can't have like millennial social media people running a governor's office. You just can't do it because they do dumb stuff like this. This kind of cavalier machismo is not good. What they should have gone with is, this is a witch hunt. Like, we've already investigated. This is a witch hunt. What are you doing? That's what they should have done. But him saying, "We welcome the congressional attention," is not good because now Gavin Newsom is going to call it to Congress. He's going to be subpoenaed. And he can either like reject the subpoena and he can turn this into a fight against the feds, or he can comply and then he's going to lie under oath, because I guarantee you he's going to lie under oath. Either way, even if he doesn't lie under oath, what's going to happen is someone intelligent is going to ask him, "Hey, why didn't you do any fire mitigation on your state park? How much have you actually done?" And all these questions that I'm asking here that have no import other than to fall on your beautiful ears. Finally, there's going to be some pressure for him to answer these questions, and I am all for it. Now, we already saw this. Make sure you guys are following Hotshot Wake Up, by the way. Just because. We're coming up on something. Like, speaking of DC, we are coming up on the 90-day mark. We're coming up on the 90-day mark of this presidential proclamation. Do you guys remember this? This is back in June, where President Trump had made this announcement that he was going to be streamlining federal wildland fire governance, right? This was the first shot across the bow for establishing FedFire. I call it FedFire. These people they're just gonna keep saying the National Wildfire Service. I hate that. It's gotta be FedFire. And as I've said from the start, this should be probably based out west. I mean, obviously it should be based out west. This shouldn't be in DC. This should be out west where the forest fires are. And I believe this should be in California, right? This is the place that needs the most help. You have a ton of federal lands out there anyway, so it's probably a good idea. Gavin Newsom continues to lie about this. And this is part of what's so frustrating, dude. He'll say that, Trump is cutting resources from the U.S. Forest Service. What he's not telling you is that Trump is removing firefighting from the U.S. Forest Service. That is true. So he can put it in this new National Wildfire Service, FedFire, and he's tripling their budget. So he is increasing the federal footprint with wildland firefighting. He's tripling it, tripling. And not just suppression, he's tripling the fuels mitigation. And I have it on very good authority that the fuels people are operating at the highest level of the formation of FedFire. So the fuels are going to be front and center. Thank God. Thank God. I am so great. I don't care who's ushering this in, whether it's President Trump, Joe Biden never did it. I mean, oh well. Whoever does this deserves praise because it's the right thing to do. I think Tim Sheehy has a huge part in this. I believe that President Trump probably gave a lot of deference to Sheehy because obviously Sheehy is a red-carded wildland firefighter. He knows what he's talking about. Now, this executive order was back in June, and it was basically saying, here's what we're going to do. This was the clock put on it. Within 90 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of the Interior and the Secretary of Agriculture, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security, shall expand and strengthen the use of partnerships, agreements, compacts, and mutual aid capabilities that empower federal, state, local, tribal, and community-driven land management that reduce wildfire risk and improve wildfire response, including on public lands. Develop and expand the use of other measures to incentivize responsible land management and wildfire prevention, mitigation, and response measures to the state and local levels. Okay? So basically by tomorrow or Wednesday, we are supposed to have an expanded and strengthened plan for the use of partnerships, agreements. Basically, we're supposed to have an outline for our new National Wildfire Service. Within 180 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of the Interior and Secretary of Agriculture, in consultation with the Secretary of Commerce and the heads of executive departments and agencies represented at the National Interagency Fire Center, NIFC, shall develop a comprehensive technology roadmap in consultation with the Director of the Office of Science and Technology to increase wildfire firefighting capabilities at the state and local levels, including through AI, data sharing, innovative modeling, and mapping capabilities, and technologies to identify wildland fire ignitions and weather forecasts to inform response and evacuation, and to promote the use of a risk-informed approach as consistent with executive order to develop new policies that remove barriers to preventing and responding to wildfires, including through year-round response readiness, better forest health, and activities outlined in Executive Order 14225. Now, just so we're clear, what part of this is, and you'll notice that there's a lot about artificial intelligence, data sharing, innovative modeling, and mapping capabilities. Okay, this is a handout to the wildfire industrial complex and their contractors. Okay, this is a handout to Lockheed Martin and a lot of the other companies that are doing all this data acquisition stuff. All right, Spencer Pratt, dude, Spencer Pratt's in the chat. Welcome, brother. Look at the video I just got. I just texted you video. Nobody's seen this. Uh-oh. Oh man, Spencer, should I review this before I show it? Hold on, let me see what Spencer sent me. Stand by, guys. What are we looking at here? Uh-oh. Oh, this is really interesting. Oh, this is really interesting. I don't know if I should show this. Hey, Spencer, should I show this on the stream? I have not seen this video before. Okay, this is from the Palisades Fire. Oh, dude. Man, Spencer's got the plugs. Bro, you gotta respond to the chat, dude. Should I be showing this on the stream, or is this something that I gotta keep private? Man, dude. This is nuts. This is nuts. Bro, how did you get this video? Holy shit. This is incredible. I don't know if I'm supposed to be sharing this on the live. So Spence, you gotta chime in, brother. Oh, this is wild. All right. Well, I'm gonna wait for Spencer to reply, and we'll see if he wants me to share this or not. Man. Yeah, I've never seen this. I've never seen this before. It's from the Palisades Fire. It's a perspective that I've never seen before. So this is very new. And I guarantee you guys haven't seen it either. Man, look, one of the things that's going to come out in this congressional investigation, and I'm going to make certain of that. Well, me, what am I going to do? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to signal boost the people who are at the forefront communicating this, and I've been trying to do this as much as possible. This was a stoppable fire. This was a stoppable fire on multiple levels. Obviously, this fire could have been prevented. This could have been prevented 100%. But the thing that people don't quite understand, and to be fair, I did not understand this on the initial attack. So when the Palisades Fire ignited, in all candor, I was in Mexico. I was on basically my honeymoon. It was a delayed honeymoon because things are so expensive. It took me a little while to save up for it, with my wife. And we were lying poolside next to the beach in beautiful Cancun, Mexico. And I was paying attention to my phone just because I was well aware, thanks to the great Rich Thompson, who had been warning about the wind event coming to Southern California. I knew something was going to happen. So I was close to my phone. And so I was tracking the Palisades Fire. And the thing was, when I heard people saying, oh, there's 80-mile-per-hour winds, and I wasn't there, you know, and I've been through some of these fires before, so I know how to read some of these things. But people are telling me there's 70, 80-mile-per-hour winds. I'm like, oh, damn, I've been on fires with that. There's no stopping that. And so I was actually, you know, one of those people out front who was saying, hey, man, there's no stopping this thing. There's no stopping this thing. I don't care about the water. You're not going to stop it with water, all that. But the more we've learned about this fire, I'm seeing a lot of things that show how easily this fire could have stopped. We've shown, I'm not trying to downplay it, but strategically placed people, including residents, not fleeing, could have stopped so many houses from burning down. So many. You're going to have a hard time stopping this thing from spotting into other areas of the state park. But yeah, so Spencer just sent me a video that I don't know how he got it. And that's why I don't want to show it until he tells me that it's kosher to show on the live. So maybe I'll wait. I'll wait to see if he responds to that. Because, and you'll see, if you do see it, you'll understand why I'm hesitant to show it right out of the gates. But the more evidence that I see from this fire, including, remember Brandy's live stream where she saved a house, which in turn saved multiple houses. And you can actually, if you watch Brandy's live stream from Palisades Fire, you'll see there's one house where she pulled out a garden hose and stopped their hedges from going up, right? They were starting to smolder because something had spotted in there. And she just took out a garden hose and stopped it. Now, if you look on Google Maps on a satellite and see where that house is, and you can locate it just by watching her stream, you'll see that that house survived and several houses around it survived. So just by using a garden hose for like 20 seconds, a journalist, a photojournalist, saved multiple houses. Think of what could have happened if half the neighborhood stayed. They probably could have saved most of the neighborhood. And the more evidence I see from this fire, the more evidence that I see, the more frustrating it gets, because this they could have stopped it. They could have stopped so much of this. So much of the destruction could have stopped. Man, let me check the chat. How do you think that they could have prepared Topanga for fire given the ecology of the area? This is a good question. I will post some video because somebody's been paying attention. I think somebody might be watching our live streams in Topanga because something changed there that I've never seen before. Now, there are certain areas where essentially Topanga looks just like the Palisades did in that it's just completely uninterrupted, huge ocean of brush going straight into the urban interface. I will show you those clips, but what I noticed, there are actually a few properties. There are a few properties that have done significant fuels work. And I mean like very recently. So somebody is paying attention. Somebody's listening. Okay. This is good. Right? This is a white pill. I know I'm always out here black pilling. This is a white pill. And the thing is, they didn't just clear around their home. They actually got a permit. They paid for the permit to go onto state property. They went onto state property and cleared out some of the state brush and cleared a good fuel break that it's not going to be perfect, but it's as good as they can do. Now, given the ecology of the area, Topanga is going to go up like a Roman candle, but it's all going to hinge on where is the ignition relative to the winds. That's the part that we can't necessarily predict. The later we get into our fire season, what we are going to have is we're going to get outflow winds, right? So that onshore flow from earlier in the year, that's over. Now we are stepping into, pretty soon, we're going to be stepping into October, November. That's when, as the season change, we are going to get those feign winds that are going to come down and through that outflow boundary around Topanga and Malibu Canyon. So you have a big concern that if you get an ignition to the east of Topanga or the eastern edge of Topanga, then it's going to be in alignment to run towards Malibu Canyon, and it's going to rip. It's going to rip. There's so many fuels out there, and they are so ready to go. It's going to be really gnarly. So anyway, while we wait for Spencer, I just wanted to highlight that we are coming into that 90-day mark. Now, what is the other thing? Within 90 days of the date of this order, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency shall consider modifying or rescinding, as consistent with applicable law, federal rules or policies that impede the use of appropriate preventive prescribed fires. I love this. I love this. So this is about cutting red tape. Cutting red tape so we can do more prescribed fires. If you remember, our last U.S. Forest Service director, the chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Randy Moore, the worst Forest Service chief in the history of our country, a soil scientist, never let a soil scientist anywhere near what's essentially a fire agency. He banned prescribed fire because he's a terrible chief. And he oversaw basically the outflow of 40% of his workforce. And now they all work for CAL FIRE, or they work as linemen. This is a pretty tragic loss. The guy was terrible. So we're going to try to cut some federal red tape for doing prescribed fire. I like this, but it's not going to help with California, because even though the feds have so much land out there, they are still hamstrung by local agencies, local air quality environmental agencies that block prescribed fire. So that's another, they're going to have to figure out a way to assert federal supremacy and, or just steamroll and just say, hey, fuck you, CARB, we're going to burn. Sorry, we're not going to stick to your 30 acres a day bullshit. B, the Secretary of Agriculture and the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, in consultation with the Secretary of the Interior, shall consider modifying or rescinding, as consistent with the applicable law, federal rules or policies hindering the appropriate use of fire retardant to fight wildfires. So Super PAV, guess what your PRM dividends are going to be? They're going to look like the Garnet Fire header. They're going to go straight into the stratosphere, dude. So depending on what comes out in the next few days, obviously they're trying to make sure that they can use retardant wherever they want, and a lot of it. So Perimeter Solutions is going to go through the roof. This is not financial advice, by the way. Secretary of Ag, in consultation with the Secretary of Interior, shall consider promoting, assisting, and facilitating, as consistent with applicable law, innovative uses of woody biomass and forest products to reduce fuel loads in areas at risk of wildfires. Outstanding. This is like the second or third time that in this executive order from President Trump, they have mentioned the reduction of fuel loading. I couldn't ask for much more. Dude, is like I said the other day when we showed that clip from Doug Burgum, it is so refreshing to have the adults in charge. It's so refreshing. I love hearing the feds talking about fuel loading. Thank God. Now, here's the thing. Let's qualify this. They're coming from the perspective of they want more logging, okay? And that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's not a great thing, but it's not terrible either, okay? We need to strike a balance between Team Plant and Team Human, because Team Human needs logs to build houses, especially in the Palisades. We need a lot of logs now. Right now, we're importing logs from other countries when we have plenty here. We're just wasting them in these massive wildfires. Now, we do need to do some logging. I think it's important, and it can serve a dual purpose of reducing some of the fuel loading that we saw here. We don't need all of these trees. We can take some of these and try to restore what the landscape looked like back in 1915, long before CO2 and global warming were a big thing, right? How do the forests look before? Why don't we try to emulate that, okay? And we're going to have less fires. Now, here's the disclaimer, though. We have to be careful with logging. We have to be careful because a lot of logging leaves a lot of slash, and that can create a lot more fires because it's not necessarily always that dense woody biomass of a huge tree, okay? That's not the biggest threat like we saw in that clip that we opened with, right? Let me show that again. I'm going to show you this part.
Question per day. Its probability. Nothing happens. Get going. If you throw a match at a redwood tree, nothing happens. But throw a match into a patch of dry grass, it goes up like tissue paper.
right? You could hold a blowtorch to a redwood tree, you're not going to set it on fire, right? That dense, massive tree, that's not necessarily what we're worried about. We're worried about the ladder fuels, all of that accumulation on the forest floor. That is a huge problem. Now, we don't want overcrowding because, of course, that's going to create water-stressed trees, and they're going to die, and then they're going to go up in a catastrophic wildfire. So we do need to strike a balance here. Now, we do need to remove some trees because we've allowed too many to grow, and there's too much water stress, and these trees are standing dead. They're going to get nuked in a wildfire. So we're just going to lose all of them, and then we're not going to really have any salvageable timber. So we can serve a dual purpose here. We have to do it intelligently. So if we're going to do logging, it has to be followed up with prescribed fire. You cannot simply do logging. As we've seen in previous studies, like in the Tea Kettle experimental forest, which has now been totally burned through by the Garnet Fire, the Garnet Fire, the Garnet Fire. What do we know about that? Well, we know that if you just clear manual thinning wise, you're going to get big fires. Okay, you have to follow up with prescribed fire. There's no replacement for that fire. So this is the one thing, and I've pushed back on the feds when they were first talking about this. I kept insisting, guys, you cannot log your way out of this. Okay, it's a good thing to do in moderation, but you are not going to log your way out of the wildfire problem. Daniel Firecopter says the fire agencies better be well prepared if Topanga gets a fire. Yes, dude. Oh, and not just the fire agencies, by the way, law enforcement. There needs to be an evacuation plan because that place is a death trap. When I was driving through there, dude, it makes the Palisades seem like the 5 freeway. The roads are so narrow and totally encloaked in oak trees and flanked by wooden fences. It is a death trap in Topanga. So they better have a very, very, very sound evacuation policy, or people need to prepare themselves to shelter in place because it's going to be a potential nightmare. Depending on the conditions on the day, it's going to be really bad. So not just the fire agencies, but law enforcement. Sequoia Grove asks, how do you ensure that logging isn't just replaced with dense monoculture with fire? So the thing is, when it comes to like dense monoculture, the concern is it's actually the timber forests where they are planting these trees very systematically, evenly spaced apart, and not necessarily scattered. Okay, so it might be tempting to think of a forest that's getting harvested and equate it with a timber forest, like private timberlands, where they cut down trees and then they replant in a very programmatic way. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about going in and clearing out areas of the forest to try to restore what it looked like when we first inherited it, which was a lot more spacing, right? Now, how they designate which trees go and which trees don't, that's to be seen. That's to be seen. And to a certain degree, we have to trust that these people are smart enough to determine the right thing to do, okay? But as long as they're following up with prescribed fire, the thing about fire is that it is going to germinate all of the seeds, and it's going to help these trees reproduce. But you have to continue to push fire through there routinely, ostensibly every year, because then you're going to kill some of those saplings and those ladder fuels that are going to lead to the destruction of these big trees. The best way to set these larger trees up for success so they become those cherished trophy giants that we love to go and see, like General Sherman, the best way to do that is by getting rid of all the stuff around its ankles. And so to answer your question, the only way to make sure that logging doesn't have negative consequences is that you follow it up with the most beneficial thing for the forest, which is fire. You have to do it. And the more often we do it, the lower the intensity of that fire, the more beneficial it becomes. And it's just like with anything else. It's just like mowing your lawn, right? If you don't do a cut for months, you can't cut it with a lawnmower. You have to cut it with a chainsaw. And you're going to have these dense, woody, growth coming out. It's not going to be grass anymore. But once you get caught up with that, then it's easy to maintain. So that's the goal of what we're going to do. To a certain degree, I will concede. This requires trust that these people aren't just interested in logging it just for commercial purposes. We do need that. So I don't want to shit all over logging. But at the same time, it has to be balanced so we don't lose these natural wonders that we love, and that we take better care of the forests, and we help protect some of the communities that border these forests so they don't get nuked in a devastating wildfire. So to a certain degree, this is a leap of faith. But at the end of the day, on paper, this sounds good. Now, the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of Ag, Secretary of Energy, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission shall consider initiating rulemaking proceedings to establish, and consistent with applicable law, best practices to reduce the risk of wildfire ignition from the bulk power system without increasing costs for electric power end users, including through methods such as vegetation management, the removal of forest hazardous fuels along transmission lines, improved engineering approaches, and safer operational practices. How can you be mad at this? The one thing that I will say, I don't know how they're going to do this without increasing costs to the end users, other than, I guess, you're just going to allocate federal tax dollars to clearing out fuels under transmission lines. How this hasn't been done already by 2025, when every one of our most catastrophic wildfires, with the exception of the Palisades Fire, has all come from these frickin' power companies and their power lines. I always ask, why do we allow fuels anywhere near roads, right? Common source of ignition, or under these power lines? Well, the answer is it's expensive and the power companies don't want to do it. Now, the Eaton fire started under a high tension transmission line. Now, this is tricky because it was on federal property, but that property is leased to the power companies to have their equipment on it. And it's all under the auspice that, or under the presumption and the expectation that the power company is going to maintain their equipment and not pose a hazard to the forest. That's why America is now suing SoCal Edison for the Eaton fire. But let's be honest, man. If they had cleared out a dirt patch around all those transmission towers, that fire doesn't happen. Fire doesn't happen. Pretty rough. So hopefully, if they can actually get this through and they start removing hazardous fuels along transmission lines, improved engineering approaches, and safer operational practices, that's probably going to be shutdowns, right? It's going to be power shutoffs. This is the only way to make sure that power lines don't start a fire is by just shutting off the power, which is, that's tricky, dude. But the other thing is monitoring, right? Checking your equipment. If you remember, the Camp Fire was started because one C-hook failed. One C-hook that was forged 100 years prior to the fire. It was placed in service 99 years before the Camp Fire started. And it hung on this metal bracket. And it was swaying across that metal bracket every time the wind blew those power lines over the course of 99 years. And it was just slowly filing away at that C-hook that was holding it up. Just like, in a cartoon, like filing through the prison bars. And then it just happened to finally snap. After it had eaten away through like 80% of that iron, it finally snapped on the worst day possible. So they need to be monitoring this stuff. They cannot allow, these power lines to rely on a 100-year-old piece of metal, right? They should be going up on these towers every single year and inspecting this during the off season, seeing if there's anything that has to be replaced. I don't care if that's expensive. Ultimately, the cost of these fires, even excluding the cost of human life, is just too much. We can't bear this anymore. So I like that they're asking for this. Finally, the Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Ag and Secretary of Interior, shall review pending and proposed wildfire-related litigation involving electrical utility companies to ensure the department's positions and proposed resolutions in such matters advance the wildfire prevention and mitigation efforts identified in this order. I like this. It's a good, thorough executive order. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof. Function of the director, This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive, procedural, enforceable at law or an entity by any party in the United States and department. All right, whatever. The rest of that, it's all just sort of like legal jargon. Like I said, I'm half Jewish, so technically my birth certificate does count as a law degree, but I am not a lawyer. Although I did watch Better Call Saul twice. I watched it twice. So I think I might be able to go to the Supreme Court and argue a case. So all that said, that 90-day clock is now. It's now. It's over the next 2 days. I might be able to provide some insight into that over the next few days. I hope I will. I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow. Who knows where I'm going? Who knows where I'm going tomorrow? It's probably not Mexico. It's probably not Mexico. But apparently I do need a suit. So I'm not looking forward to that. So anyway, let me review the chat. Doña de California. I'm a bobcat person, but seriously, I can't have cats, but I like them. I've fostered a cat. I've found her a wonderful home. God bless you. God bless you. Duluth Fire with a pretty awesome fire up in Pendleton on Buffalo Burn Camp in the past 2 hours. Oh, that's cool. We'll have to check out the firing up in Camp Pendleton. I didn't get an answer from Spencer on whether or not I can post that video. So sorry, guys. Sorry for the tease, but I think he's probably going to post it if it's kosher to post. Like I said, I'm very judicious about the amount of information, the kinds of information, the sources of the information that I get, because I get a lot. I try to make sure that I respect people's wishes, and I have a sense of, because for the years that I was chasing fires and I was around these hotshot crews and higher level people, part of the reason they let me around was because they knew they could trust me. So if they were doing something dumb that's not for public consumption, it never made it to the public, ever. There's so much footage that I got that I would love to share with everybody, but it's not mine to share. And I think it's important that we honor that, especially in light of like the way that social media works now. There's no integrity, there's no trustworthiness, and there's no due diligence done. Everybody kind of just throws things out there without thinking about it. I know that some people think maybe I'm just sort of flying by the seat of my pants. And I don't script any of these shows, but I'm not flying by the seat of my pants. And where I do get some pushback is when I criticize Gavin Newsom. Because, political tribalism, it's become a serious problem for people. And for some reason, they think that I'm just a political tribalist. And I'm really not. I'm really not. But Gavin Newsom deserves criticism, like a lot. And people get really mad when I talk about his record with wildfire. And I made this post where I talked about how someone said, it does seem that California has had more fires under Gavin's watch. I've actually commented on this to friends. When the fires have happened, Newsom goes on that climate change kick when it is actually man-made for the most part. Now, I said it seems that way because it is that way. 7 of the 10 biggest wildfires in California history have been under Gavin Newsom. Where's the lie in that? I'm not blaming him for all these fires. All I'm saying is they all happened under his watch. August Complex, that was over 1 million acres. Dixie Fire, wasn't that 1 million acres? There was like 900 something thousand. The August Complex, it's multiple fires that got bundled into one, but the Dixie Fire was a single fire. It's 1 million acres. So look at when these fires were. 2020, 2021. Now, Gavin was elected in 2018, but he wasn't in office, even though he was the lieutenant governor for 8 years. So he was in the governor's office for 8 years. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like pageantry. It's not necessarily like a real function in government to be lieutenant governor, but he's still there, right? Jerry Brown was awful with this stuff, right? So I'm not saying that Gavin Newsom is the only shitty governor. Jerry Brown was horrendous with wildfire stuff. Absolutely horrendous. Park Fire, 2024. SCU Lightning Complex. Now notice when you see SCU Lightning Complex or LNU Lightning Complex, does anyone know what those letters mean? Are these federal fires or state fires? Since Gavin is always drawing these lines, those letters, these are the units, the CAL FIRE units in which these fires occurred. These are state fires. So when you look at some of these fires, some of these massive ones that did like some of the most damage, again, because 40% of the WUI homes in California are in the SRA, the state responsibility area. Only 4% of WUI homes are in the federal responsibility area. So I don't really care that the feds have so much land in California. At the end of the day, they're hamstrung by state agencies who don't allow them to do firing operations. And 2, they're not around homes. So you could have 1 million acres burn in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't really matter. Where it interfaces with the homes is what matters the most. And most wildland urban interface homes are in the state responsibility area. Okay? So the fires that matter are in the state and local areas, as we saw. Creek Fire, 2020. LNU, 2020. North Complex Fire, 2020. 7 of these 10 fires occurred while Gavin was governor. And all I'm saying is that's when it happened. Now, since Gavin was elected, he's given California its highest fatality fire, biggest single fire, biggest fire seasons, most houses burned, most expensive fire, the worst record on wildfire in human history, and it's not even close. This is when he was like trying to steal Cal Fire's valor. This was his blue-haired intern tweeting while he was away in Italy. The courage of our brave Cal Fire firefighters and partners working across the state to protect communities impacted by wildfires is the spirit that defines the best of California. At the end of the day, we're many parts, but one body. It's a really odd statement. It's typical of a blue-haired intern to write something like that. Now, the thing to remember is that the feds provide more assets for wildland firefighting to California than any other state. And I believe it's more than any other state combined. California has just about 50% of all the hotshot crews, right? The most elite, most expensive special uses crew in the entire federal government. And as it pertains to wildland fire, Gavin Newsom gets half of them. That's crazy, dude. And keep in mind, these are Californians. They work for the feds, but these are Californians. These are dudes who live in like Green Valley and Santa Clarita and Palmdale. You know, they live in the cheapest parts of Santa Clarita because they can't afford to live in the areas that they protect. And so these are all California guys suiting up for the feds, and they never get any credit. And this is part of the reason why I made Hotshot, because Cal Fire has 1 billion cheerleaders. They have 1 billion cheerleaders. They're on Ellen. They have the blue pants, so they get all the attention, right? And they drive in red trucks, so they get all the attention. But the feds, who are out there doing so much work, California boys going out there and fighting fire by hand, getting zero recognition. This is part of why I had to make Hotshot, because who the fuck is standing up for them? Who is showing what they do? If the governor of California is going to shit on his own Californians who are fighting fire on behalf of the U.S. Forest Service, who's going to do it? Nobody. It's incredible to see a head of state shitting on California firefighters the way that he does. It's unbelievable. And so if you think that I'm being unfair going after this scumbag, I don't care. I don't care. You can complain on my Twitter all you want. I do not care. This guy is a scumbag. And if you think that I'm unfair by putting all this on him because it happened during his reign, don't take it from me. Take it from the horse's mouth.
No question that we have not done justice on our forest management. I don't think anyone disputes that. We acknowledge our role and responsibility to do more in that space.
So he's acknowledging fault for not doing enough forest management to prevent these fires, because we all know that prescribed fire prevents this stuff. And he failed to do what he promised to do. And he does this every year. Now, the other thing that we know about this guy is he likes to take credit for everything. Now, if you are going to do all of your Cal Fire photo ops where you use these guys as political pawns for your stump speeches as you're campaigning for president, and you're going to take credit for all the wins, then you have to wear all the losses. That's how this works, right? He's not out there on the front lines fighting these fires. He's not doing any of the fucking work. So for him to use these guys as pawns to make him look good, he wants to own all the wins, all the times they stop these fires. Well, then you got to own it when they don't stop the fires. You have to own it. The other thing that he does is he shits all over the feds. And so he's always quick to point out how, oh, the feds are mismanaging their lands and they've got this huge fire. Okay, if we're doing that, if we're going to blame the landholder for the fire, where did Palisades Fire start? It started on your property, pal. You don't get to play both sides. So if you want to take credit for the wins and you want to blame an agency because a fire burned on their property and nuked something, that sword cuts both ways. So for all of you guys complaining, when I hold this scumbag to account, sorry, it's his rules. It's his rules. He wants to take the wins. He's going to have to take the losses. That's how it works. All right, let's catch up on this chat here. Smooth like 80 Grit says, you aren't going to DC, are you? Why would I go to DC? I am a humble chicken farmer in Tennessee. I'm just a dude who screams at a webcam on the internet, but I do it live, so it matters. Is it weird to you that I seem to have so much of this information about what's happening? Is it weird to you that I knew that this congressional investigation was coming? Is it weird? I know it's very popular for people to say, oh, I never had Spencer Pratt on my bingo card. I never had Spencer Pratt on my bingo card. Did you have me on your bingo card? Do you ever wonder how I know all these things? Here's the thing, guys. I remember screening my film Hot Shot And by the way, on this note of like people who think that I'm too unfair to Gavin Newsom and think that they need to point out to me that the feds have all this property and they're not doing enough. Again, I literally like wrote the book on this. You guys remember the scene where I talked about the forestry tech? Who was talking about forestry technicians? Nobody. I can tell you nobody. Because this was a part of my research and part of my frustration is nobody's talking about how fucking horribly these guys are treated. Sometimes a news agency would talk about how they're not getting as much pay as CAL FIRE, but nobody talked about the forestry technician angle. Why? Because they don't understand these people. They don't understand the wildland firefighters in the Forest Service like I do. I was so close to all of them. They don't understand how big of a deal it was that they weren't even called firefighters. People just gloss over that detail. I didn't. I had an entire chapter in my film on this for a reason, because I know these guys too well. And I know how much it bothers them. And it was a big fucking deal. Now, I'm the one who's pointed out how fucked up the US Forest Service is. And I took them to task. And the fun thing was, I showed that scene in front of the deputy chief of the US Forest Service in a room full of other big swinging dicks. And she had to sit through it and couldn't say a word about it. And I was right there behind her smiling. And look, she took it like a champ. I'll give her credit. She was great. She was super nice. And we had a great chat afterwards. But dude, I've been bitching about the feds since you were an itch in your daddy's underpants. So don't give me this shit like you need to lecture me on the feds' responsibility in California. Get the fuck out of here. But when I was screening that film, Representative John Curtis from Utah, he's a congressman. And at that time, he was like co-chair of the Wildfire Caucus in Congress with Nagoose, right? That grandstanding jerk. They're both kind of grandstanding, but I will give credit to Representative Curtis. He showed up. He showed up to this screening. And somebody asked him after we screened the film, someone asked in the audience, like, dude, how do we get DC to move on some of this stuff that we just watched? And you know what he said? He said, good storytelling. That's what it takes. Like, if you want a politician to move on something, you need good storytelling. He didn't say lobbying. He didn't say money. He didn't say petitions. He said storytelling. He's like, if you come to me with a good story, then we can make things move. You'd be surprised. Spencer Pratt is a masterful storyteller. This is how he's managed to work his way up into the annals of power and have this kind of influence. So I don't care if you like it or not. He is a great storyteller, and he has one hell of a story to tell. He survived the Palisades Fire. He almost died. He was trying to defend his home, and he got the hell out of here. And it was probably a good idea, because where his home was kind of a death trap. So I wouldn't have recommended staying. That's one of those areas where you have to use discernment, like, maybe you don't stay there. But he's got a great story to tell. And because of that, that's how he's gotten to the position that he's in. I also happen to be pretty good at storytelling, okay? It's kind of my job. So if you're expecting a fire scientist to be getting into these positions and getting into these meetings, if you're expecting a politician or a respected journalist, if those even exist, I'm sorry, guys. You got to be a good storyteller. You got to be a good storyteller. And Spencer Pratt is a great storyteller. He's a great storyteller, and he's a relentless storyteller. And so that is why he is being invited into these meetings. This is why he's got more juice on the Palisades Fire investigation than a lot of attorneys have. This is why he's able to text people at 11 o'clock at night in Washington, D.C. and get an immediate response. You guys would be amazed at the insight this dude has. You'd be amazed. And it's because he's a good storyteller. So if you guys are, in this wildfire space, you want to see something change, you need to start telling stories. You really do. You got to find a way to do it, right? Maybe grow a mustache. Maybe start doing a live stream. Sequoia Grove. When you said highest fatality fire, you were counting the excess deaths from the smoke in January. Sequoia Grove, that's a good question. So there's an interesting stat that's come out regarding the Palisades and Eaton fires, where people have tabulated excess deaths, right, as a result of stress, smoke inhalation, obviously the emotional toll of losing your home and that kind of trauma. especially in an area that has a lot of elderly folks, right? There are a lot of people like my grandparents, elderly members of my family who had to flee the Palisades. And this can be a very, very stressful situation, can shorten your life, can end your life. And then there's also, the smoke and chemical inhalation from all the stuff that was burning. And then there's missed doctor appointments, right? You're being displaced. You're missing your cancer screening. There have been a lot of deaths that have been attributed to the Palisades and Eaton fires that were indirect from the fire. So these people didn't necessarily burn up, but because of the fire, they died. And I believe they've got the death toll right now over like 250, something around that, which is kind of insane. It's kind of insane. Daniel Firecopter says Cal Fire only has 2 C-130s in service. Where's our other C-130s? That's a good question. I remember wasn't he advertising that they've got like 6? Where are they? Where are they? Dude, that's that magical Gav hands. He just waves the Gav hands and it's like, hey, forget everything that I just told you. It never happened. It's kind of incredible. Did I see your question about the mountain wave? I did see your question about the mountain wave. Let's read Sequoia Grove's question about the mountain wave. Have you gone into if the wind on Palisades was from a mountain wave? It was not from a mountain wave. The winds in the Palisades were not that intense. They were intense enough for a big conflagration, but they never got over 42, 43 miles per hour. Okay? They were traditional outflow winds. Okay? And again, for most of the day, and we've covered this multiple times, so I apologize for those of you who are regular viewers. We're going to go over this again. By the time the fire had reached the Pacific Ocean and burned through a lot of areas in the Palisades, the peak wind gust by that evening, by 6 p.m., which would be just about 8 hours into the incident, the peak wind gust was 38 miles per hour. Anybody who knows wildfire knows that 38 miles an hour is plenty for a nasty fire. But it is operable. It is operable. You can have aircraft, like they did have aircraft. They had tons of helicopters on this thing, even though there's still people on the internet who believe there were no copters. So we didn't necessarily get crazy, unprecedented winds over the Palisades. It never happened. The 80 mile per hour gusts that they keep talking about, they were occurring in areas outside of the Palisades. The Palisades is generally Vinchata, okay? And we have tons of video. I'm not going to cue them up now because my audience has seen them a billion times. The fires were not cranking as hard as they say, and a lot of those homes could have been saved. I need more evidence than a single station. Well, Sequoia Grove, I don't care what you need. We're not here to meet your needs. You need to catch up on some of our live streams where I've shown tons of video of what it was like on the ground. And you should reference Fire Photo Girl's live stream from that day. That's probably the best thing that you can do, okay? I can tell you from all of the evidence that I've seen, all of the video clips that I've got from Palisades residents, from firefighters, and from firecopters that you have not seen yet. The winds were not hurricane force winds, period. Period, end of discussion, okay? There's tons of videos. We've shown them a bunch on these streams. Go watch Brandy's live stream from that day. Go watch the full thing. This is the one place where I encourage you guys to go and absorb as much unedited content as possible. What is my motto here? We do it live. We do it live because you can't hide the truth that way. Go watch Brandy's, and it's at Fire Photo Girl. Go watch her live stream from January 7th. And you can see for yourself. There are times when some gusts kick up and it's pretty nasty. But for the most part, it's pretty calm. And the thing you have to understand about the Palisades, which I understand because I grew up in the Palisades. I spent every weekend in the Palisades because that's where my family lived. It's Vinchata. It's shaded from the wind. They do not get the same winds that Malibu Canyon does, okay? It's a different place. So they did have some gusts. They got, I believe, into the low 40s at 10 p.m. at night. But throughout most of the day, it never got over 38 mile per hour gusts. And for most of the time, as the fire marched its way all the way to the ocean, the average winds were in the 20s. They were in the 20s. Now understand that is still plenty for a big fire. But the main issue with the Palisades burning down is that there was nobody there to put out the tiny spot fires in people's ornamental vegetation and gutters and little corners of the roof and eaves. That was the reason why the neighborhood burned down. Okay? Not enough resources where they needed to be. And I include residents with that. So many of the people who stayed saved their homes. We've shown this over and over and over again. The cunning Phil Cunningham says, none of the stations anywhere near the fire suggested a downslope windstorm. And Dr. Phil is a scientist. He may not have a mustache, but he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. There were stronger winds out by Malibu. Exactly, right? Those of us who grew up there, we know the wind patterns there. And the Palisades is not, they're Vinchata. They're not the same as Malibu Canyon. Malibu Canyon is like a fatal funnel. They get really, really nasty winds through there. And the Palisades just aren't the same. I think the reason why the winds were lower over the city because of the rotor. Because the rotor? Not like the hydraulic jump from a mountain wave, says Phil Cunningham. Yeah, I don't think that was the issue, guys. It's just, I don't know. I feel like people get stuck on some of this terminology, and people are trying to find a reason for why things went so poorly. You don't need to take my word for things, okay? I'm not going to be one of those guys who's going to say, look, I know the truth. You guys need to just shut up and trust me. Please review all of the video evidence. I probably have a lot more than you guys have access to for reasons. But all the video that I've reviewed, and like I said, you can see my tweet history. I haven't deleted these tweets. Go check my tweets from like January 7th through January 10th. There were a lot of tweets in there where I was like, hey man, all you guys bitching about the fire hydrants, they've gone dry on the Thomas fire. They went dry on the Eden fire. This does happen on these massive conflagrations. And if you think that water was going to help, trust me, it wasn't going to help. Okay, that's out there. I haven't deleted that. And that's because I was believing all the people who said that we were getting 80-mile-per-hour winds in the Palisades. And the thing is, that's not what happened. So since that time, I've had so many people, including people in my own family and good friends and firefighters who were there, sending me their videos, and we've shown a bunch of them. And you can see that, no, they did not have 80-mile-per-hour winds. They had some gusts. There were some times when it was pretty gusty, but it wasn't that bad. It was manageable. The main problem was that too many people left, and there weren't enough people with hoses to spray some of this stuff down. They easily could have saved thousands of homes, easily. I will stake my entire name on that. Go watch Brandy's live stream. That's the best thing. Why? Because she did it live. She did it live, right? Remember, in this dystopian world of AI, the only way to prove that you're human and to prove that the winds in the Palisades weren't unmanageable is to do it live. Thanks for doing it live, guys. I'm going to try to do it live tomorrow, but no promises. I'm getting on a jet plane, and I don't know if I'll be back again. I don't know if I'll be back live again. I will try. I might have a special guest. We'll find out when we do it live.